We turn now to the gentleman, Mr. Barrow.
I thank the chairman. Ms. Dillon touched on some of the practical considerations in actually conducting a voluntary incentive auction regime, so I want to explore that just a little bit. You know, old Aesop, that old fable spinner, told a bunch of fables. One of them that he talked about was one he titled The Fable of the Dog in the Manger. This is the story of the dog that made his bed in a manger of hay. He couldn't eat the hay, but he'd snap and snarl at any animals that could whenever they come by. And the moral of the fable is folks often begrudge others what they can't use themselves or won't use themselves. Now, that's a negative characteristic of human nature in the part of some folks, but I think it can actually describe a practical, real-world problem if folks end up, through no motive of their own, end up begrudging folks what they can't use themselves. You can imagine lots of license holders with enough money to get a license, but not enough money to be able to develop it. You can find folks scattered to hell and gone who've got licenses and spectrum all over the place, but the buyers and sellers aren't together. It seems to me that bringing folks together who have the spectrum but would rather have the money, together with folks who got the money and would rather have the spectrum, would be something we could all agree on, and it's something we'd all want to get behind some way or another. But Ms. Dillon touched on some of the practical considerations of this and talking about that you can't do this on a dime. Creating this marketplace and this market opportunity is going to entail some considerations, some practical considerations. So, Ms. Dillon, let me ask you, based on y'all's experience at U.S. Cellular, have y'all ever acquired any of your licenses in an auction format?
Have we all? I'm sorry.
Have you acquired any of your licensing authority as the result of an auction format? Have you all gotten any of what you got to use through the auction process?
Yes, we have.
How long, based on your experience, if you have any idea, how long did it take between the time that the spectrum was identified as being available, on the one hand, and the time of a resulting auction on the other? How much of a
honestly, I would probably need to get back to you with our specific experience because our last, auction or purchase of spectrum predated my time at U.S. Cellular. But it's my understanding that it's not a fast process, and that actually the process of making it available, conducting an auction, clearing spectrum, and then deploying services is probably a multi-month, multi-year process.
I imagine the next phase, the time you actually buy the spectrum in the course of an auction, the time that you can actually deploy services over it is going to take a far greater period of time. Based on y'all's experience, what kind of time are we talking about there? Because we talked earlier in testimony about the fact that the crunch time's coming in 2014, which is right around the corner. Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, give us some idea of how long it would take between the time someone acquires broadband spectrum through an auction and the time they can actually deploy services over what they've bought.
Yeah, it's my understanding that it's probably a multi-month, 18-month to 2-year process, but I'd like to come back with specific examples from our experience. But I think more importantly, the point is, and that's why there is urgency, the spectrum crunch is on us now, and there's engineers around this, this industry very hard at work driving efficiencies, deploying LTE, fourth-generation networks to drive more efficiency and to handle the demand. But we believe that the need is now to start that process because it is time-consuming.
Thank you, ma'am. We got some dogs out there sitting on a bed of hay, and they want to sell it to the other animals. We ought to encourage that as much as we possibly can. Thank you very much, and I give back the balance of my time.